every macro expert I've spoken to in the last month has been giga bearish. But today's guest, Eric Krown, is not. He's looking purely at the charts, and he thinks they're telling him everyone else is wrong, that equities are heading back to the highs, and that Bitcoin could be putting in a macro low right here. He's got a very specific outlook for Q2, where he sees Bitcoin by the end of the year, and he makes a pretty bold call on gold that I think a lot of people are going to disagree with. This is Eric Krown. Please give the video a like and subscribe on your way in. Enjoy the show. Nothing said on Risk Takers is a recommendation to buy or sell any asset, token, or security. The views expressed by hosts and guests are purely their opinion and do not constitute financial advice. Before we start, I just want to quickly tell you about today's sponsor, MetaMask. MetaMask is so much more than just being a wallet provider now. You've got Solana integrations, Bitcoin integrations. Obviously, they've still got Ethereum, all in one place. So you haven't got to hold multiple wallets, multiple seed phrases. Obviously, very annoying when you have to do that. But one thing that they have as well, which is really, really cool, is they've got this card, right? And this card gives you access to spend crypto wherever you want. You've got two different options, whether it's a free one or a paid one. But the coolest thing about the card, you get cash back on purchases, and the card gives you access to this hotel site that gives you 60% off hotel bookings. So if you've got any holidays coming up or you need some hotel stays, it's unbelievably useful to A, be able to actually get the discount, and B, if you've got money on chain, just use your money on chain. Super simple. Thank you so much to MetaMask for sponsoring the show. Now we're going to get into the show with Krown. Krown, thank you so much for being here, bro. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, always good to be here and speak with you, man. I really enjoy all these talks, man.
Amazing. So, Krown, everyone's been giga bearish. I've probably done 20 interviews in 10 interviews in the last 30 days, 45 days, and every sort of like macro expert I've spoken to, basically giga bearish, especially on like US equities. Where are you?
Yeah, so I need to preface this whole statement by saying, first and foremost, if you've been familiar with me, if you're watching this channel, you've seen me for like the last few years. I'm a natural bear. I love being bearish. I love playing downside markets. That is really where my skill is. But I'm actually not of the same opinion right now. I'm just not seeing the things that I need to see to be immediately bearish, like super bearish, like some people are, especially with Bitcoin, especially in traditional markets, absolutely in traditional markets, really. I just don't understand it. I think that these people are coming from more of maybe a macro background. And, I think macro stuff, it always makes sense. It always sounds very, high consciousness and very cerebral, and it sounds right. It sounds intuitive, but very rarely do I see these people get things right. And honestly, the price is always going to be the most pure form of analysis. It's going to be the first thing to tell you, because the macro sort of narrative will just follow what price does anyways. I mean, I'll bring you back to 2022. How many people were so damn bearish into 2022 calling for, 10,000, 8,000, 5,000, zero for Bitcoin, for example, because macro, and we're headed into a recession, all of this and that. And look, they might have even been right about the macro, but in terms of what it means for price, these two things are not correlated. And if there's something that I could say to the audience that I think would help a lot, is you're going to understand markets and trading a million times better than the next person if you just understand that it's all a game, and all of these sort of macro narratives and whatnot is just entertainment. It's all entertainment, realistically. And it sounds cool. It's fun to talk about. But at the end of the day, does it get the job done if you're actually trading or investing in these markets? In my experience, no. You're going to be the last person to kind of catch on to a move, just like the on-chain guys.
Amazing. So, I mean, the narratives have been aggressively strong right now. Like, you've got so many reasons. I mean, I've been speaking about them. Like, you've got the labor market weakening across the board. The consumers basically cannot deal with any price rises right now. And what we got, like oil ripping to $100 a barrel, that has preceded recessions every single time towards the end of cycles. You had that. If you look at it's harrowing to look at the recessions post large oil spikes chart. They're just like blatant kills demand. So many underlying variables. Can you show us what you're seeing in the charts, please, that negate all this?
Yeah, sure. Of course. Let me just share my screen, but let me also answer that as well. When it comes to recession and when it comes to looking at charts, you can see markets go up during a recession. I mean, these things aren't necessarily completely correlated. Let me get my chart.
Yeah, oftentimes the recession is actually, like, this actually is true, right? When the recession is actually quantified, like by the NBER, right? Because essentially you need 2 quarters of negative GDP growth for an actual recession. Yes, they changed it in 2022, right, but regardless, right? that means that the economy's been bad for 2 quarters by the time the recession's ticked off. So it's already been bad.
Exactly. And the market, in the stock market particularly, is a forwards-looking price mechanism. So once all of that data comes into play, you've probably seen most, if not all, of the move anyways. So, like I was saying before, it's like if you're paying attention to the news and these sort of things, these sort of data points, you're already kind of behind in almost every case. Not always, obviously. There is a time and place for these things. But anyways, when it comes to Bitcoin here, so I think we kind of wanted to center this talk around just the higher term timeframes and, what is my general sort of view on Bitcoin and markets and, throughout this year. And when it comes to Bitcoin over these next few months, I like this base that Bitcoin set in here at about 60,000 bucks. And I think realistically, we're done going down for now. Probably should expect some upside this month, maybe next month, perhaps as high as like low 80,000s, let's say 81 to 82,000 bucks. But I think that we're range bound at best for the next 3 months, basically. I think that you're not going to experience anything significant for Bitcoin going into summer. In summer, we might start to get some actual movements, but between now and that time, I basically just expect Bitcoin to be in this range between, let's call it 81,000 on the upside versus about 60,000 bucks on the downside on a closing basis. That means you can get wicks above, wicks belows, but ultimately, I don't really expect price action to deviate from that. Now, I look at that actually as a very good thing for Bitcoin. If Bitcoin can set in a base here, dig its heels in, and we're still kind of within the same range going into summer, I'm going to turn into, Krown runs with bulls. I'm going to be like quite bullish that that we've seen the low. It doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin's going to green dildo from here to like 100,000 plus, but the sort of things will be set in motion. And that's just based off of the quarterly right here. You can see Bitcoin bounce beautifully off of the yellow 21 EMA, and I expect it to get somewhere close to that 5 EMA in this quarter on this bounce. And then it's probably going to, sell off from there and get caught between these 2 major moving averages. And that's fine. That's good. Bitcoin has a history of putting in beautiful macro lows, by the way, on that yellow 21 EMA going all the way back to 2015 over here. And even if Bitcoin were to come back down below it, which it did for a bit in 2022, you might call that the FTX black swan and whatever. So a bit of a deviation there. Long term, to me, if I'm putting on my investor hat, that's great value. I like that if I'm going to hold this thing for more than 4 years. I'm happy with that. And if you're a long-term investor, I think that is worth considering. What is my worst case scenario for Bitcoin at this moment? Maybe coming down somewhere to this blue box in the low $50,000 territory. I think it would be a quick wick. But with what we're seeing and with some of the signals that I'll bring up now, I think there's good reason to believe or to be at least somewhat optimistic. And the reasons why I'm looking at that are, well, many. We'll start off with some of the technical reasons, of which we'll start off over here on the monthly for the Bollinger Bands on Bitcoin. A couple of things. One, we can see in past bear markets, Bitcoin kind of likes to play close to that lower Bollinger Band low. That's kind of where you got this low in 2015, 2018, and officially in 2022. And basically just those lower bands kind of contracting into price action is a good signal in and of itself. Volatility is contracting. Bitcoin's near the low side of the range. That's essentially what it implies. And from a sort of macro perspective, I want to also outline that on the monthly MACD, you got a very interesting setup right here, in fact. In the past, whenever we've seen the monthly MACD come to the zero read, and so I'm talking about the MACD lines coming to that zero read, that has basically been around your previous macro lows. And if you go ahead and look on the chart, you can see that, some of them were quite literally a little bit after the macro lows. Some of them were right on the macro lows. But, basically once you get down around that zero read on the monthly MACD, you're pretty damn close to a low. It might already be might be a month away or two away, but whatever. Again, my point is that when we look at this, we can see that, yes, it is not at the zero read just yet. And again, most of those zero reads have come actually after the macro low. But we can anticipate that over the next month, maybe 2 months at most, it will come down to that zero read. So that's reason number one. And that, in my opinion, is a generally good reason. Now, moving on from there, we can go into, of course, the monthly stochastic oscillator. And the monthly stochastic oscillator is in a very interesting position here too. For the open of April, we see it getting pretty much down to that 20 read right here. Now, it's still 1 month away from that. My projection on this indicator shows that will happen next month, basically at the latest. I mean, well, at the earliest, I get, but also the latest because it's probably going to get down around there. And whenever we've seen the monthly stochastic oscillator get down to this region, again, I'll mark that off with these green vertical bars. What do you know? Low, low, low. And this one was a little bit before the low. Again, you might call that the FTX black swan, yada, yada. But again, in this case, we can see a similar setup here. I mean, shit, Bitcoin's come down to that same green 55 EMA, which it has played off of many times in the past. And we're seeing the monthly stochastic oscillator in that same area. So if we, assuming that this remains somewhere down around here, even close to there coming into May or whatever the month is after this month, because I barely even know what fucking time it is. Well, at that point, again, that is number 2 or number 3.
Just on that number 2, Krown, sorry.
Yeah.
Like, is this something you've used in the past, right? Because Bitcoin's essentially still so fresh, so new. Is this an indicator that you actually used back in sort of 2021, 2022 to sort of find the lows then? Or is this something that you've just like recently found because essentially these things almost didn't have enough data to actually like provide back then?
Yeah, for this one, I've been using for a while, as with the MACD and as with the RSI, which we'll get into in a moment. Because, you do have 4 previous cycles here. Look, it would be better if we had more data points, obviously, but we got to work with what we have. And to be fair, it's been working quite uniformly in the past. And so I don't have a reason to believe that relationship is broken until it's broken. I'm completely open to being wrong about anything, obviously. But at the end of the day, man, that seems like something worth paying attention to me. Again, if you're thinking in terms of value, I like the low 60s. I really do. Can Bitcoin take a step lower? Absolutely. Anything's possible in markets. Absolutely. But at the same time, if you're going to trade, if you're going to invest, you got to pick your risks and you got to, either be okay with it or not. And for me, that is completely fine for, as a long-term investor. When we go over here to the monthly, let me actually go to the monthly RSI. That'll be better. There we go. We can see that all previous lows for Bitcoin have come in where? They've come in around the same RSI read. It's going to be represented by this red horizontal bar right here. And whenever Bitcoin kind of gets into that region, basically you've seen about the lows, if not the lows. Again, for cycle, or this would technically be cycle number 2, because it wasn't necessarily, or actually no, it was kind of alive for cycle number 1, but too early then, a little bit higher than that number, still relevant, but yeah. Anyways, this one over here, boom, low. This one over here, 1 month after the low. This one over here, a few months before the low. Again, you might call that the FTX black swan. Weird things happened, but if you're thinking in terms of being a long-term investor, these are, in my opinion, high value prices. And what do you know? The monthly RSI is exactly right there. And Bitcoin has dipped below it for a second, now bouncing off of it. So I'm treating that as if it's still valid, at least for now. I don't see any reason to be, negative on it at this moment. What else do we have? Yeah, so we already spoke about the monthly green 55 EMA. Bitcoin just has a nice history of kind of playing off that for those macro lows. And then there's another big one, and I think it kind of bleeds into another conversation that perhaps we want to have, which is Bitcoin versus gold. So for that, we can look at this ratio here. And I think that this is incredibly interesting because many people know, and many people are anticipating that, okay, Bitcoin put in the highs in October of 2025, and everyone knows that it takes about a year for Bitcoin to go from the low, or from high to low. So we should be expecting the next low in October of 2025. Maybe that works. It's very possible that it does work. But I would also say, if you look at this chart, and I would argue gold is probably a better denominator at the current moment than the US dollar, because the US dollar is so volatile and it's, we're not really sure if it's going to still be the world reserve currency and this and that and yada, yada. Gold more or less steady over time. And if we measure from this ratio, which is using gold as a denominator rather than US dollar as a denominator, it has played in a very similar fashion the whole way through. Throughout this first cycle right here, or this first one that really matters right here, from high to low, it took how long? 395 days. Okay, great. Let's see how long the next one took from the 2018 cycle, high to low. 367 days. Okay, about a year, basically on the dot. Then, of course, we had the 2021 cycle. This one taken about 365 days as well. Okay, so these are quite uniform thus far. And the interesting thing about this pair, in comparison to the US dollar pair, is that the US dollar pair made its highs in October of 2025. This pair made its high in December of 2024. So it's actually, a little bit further along that whole time schedule. It's about 427 days from high to low. And again, it just makes me consider, okay, is something else going on now? It really does feel like the herd, the general mentality is extremely negative on Bitcoin, very negative on traditional markets as well, which I'm not bearish on right now. Maybe in about a year I will be, but not right now, no. And I feel like this is one of the few times, or this is one of the times where being a contrarian, may end up paying quite well. So these things all together, I think, do provide at least the glimmer of hopium for Bitcoin here. But again, I want to be very, very, very direct in saying, even if Bitcoin is putting in a macro low here, I don't expect anything super interesting throughout the next few months. Again, low 80s at most to the upside versus, low 60s, maybe a quick move into the 50s to the downside during this 3 months. I think it's going to be boring. Boring equals good. If you see Bitcoin basically hanging around here by summer, I'm looking at that as bullish long term.
I think that is a good point, right? When it comes to actually forming lows generally, in whatever market it is, well, in crypto especially, these things take a while to form. And boring means that, okay, enough time has actually passed for this thing to actually begin to reverse. And the Bitcoin to gold relationship is super interesting, right? You've had that because so did you say the 427 days was the high to today, or was that the high to the
that's the high to the lowest price for that pair as of now, which was
and that hit what, like 13, 14?
Oh, on the ratio?
The ratio.
Let me bring it up really quick because actually there's another couple things that are quite interesting about that ratio. Look, I would definitely say if you're if you're choosing between Bitcoin and gold, this pair has bottomed out. But basically, it got down to what? 12, around 12. So, when I'm actually not sharing my screen. My apologies. But basically, I'm referring to this right here. Look, this is the Bitcoin versus gold ratio. Bitcoin basically came down to that green 55 here on the quarterly time frame. This has a series of higher lows over time. This is kind of exactly where you'd expect the next higher low to be. Got down to 12. Again, it's like if you're going to choose where you put your risk on, this would be it for me from switching from gold to Bitcoin.
Just on the gold to Bitcoin, there's the series of higher lows is like beautiful, you're really uniform, but the 4 recent higher highs are like really not very convincing. Yeah. Do you read anything into that?
So the way that I look at this right now is assuming that this does put in a higher low here. This is actually, in my opinion, extremely good for Bitcoin versus gold, that is. You'd have the same highs, but higher lows. Red circles are the higher lows, same highs are right here. What is that telling you? It's telling you that it's being accumulated over time. And this is over a very long time. This is like a macro trade right here. And so what I would expect to see, if this is going to hold over, and this would kind of be like the idea, is I'd expect to see something like this. And what is that? That is essentially an ascending triangle, which is just a technical formation telling you that the buyers are getting more aggressive on the lows and the sellers are, not getting down as far and more importantly, just defending the same area. If it was bearish, we'd be expecting lower highs over time. It's not getting lower highs over time. In fact, it made a new high in 2024, but still, this is a formation. It's a consolidation. And I really look at all of this whole piece of price action right here as a part of the same sort of range, I suppose. And as long as Bitcoin's holding those higher lows, which again, if you're using technical analysis, you kind of expect it to put it in around that green 55 EMA. I mean, that's got to be this is the setup that you wait for, because if you're going to be wrong, all you need to wait for is this thing to invalidate, which is just closing below that green 55 EMA. So to me, it's like this is the no-brainer trade right now, going from gold to Bitcoin. Now, it could very well be that Bitcoin and gold both go down versus the US dollar, but Bitcoin goes down less versus the US dollar. That is one way that this ratio can continue to go up. But even with this one, I don't expect this thing to just reverse exactly from here. This is going to take time. This is a quarterly time frame. So each and every bar represents 3 months of price action. So realistically, if we're going to see a reversal here, this is like an end of year type thing. But I think it's very possible. And I think it's just something that very few people are considering right now. And so it's something that I want to be bringing to the forefront because it fits my biases.
Perfect. That's exactly what you want to do.
Indeed.
So Bitcoin has been trading as beta to tech, right, for the longest period of time. I mean, it's hilarious. If I don't know if you've seen that IGV chart, the IGV software index.
No, I don't think so, actually.
Okay, so
IGV?
this is crazy, right? Put IGV on the chart, and now overlay Bitcoin. So Bitcoin with the same like on its own price scale.
Sure. You want to do same price scale
on its own price scale. So it's one's on the right, one's on the left.
Let me.
And then like these things has just been trading one to one. Like it's absolutely obscene how the level of correlation between these two indexes, between Bitcoin, sorry, and actually if you make it in the last like 4 years more so. So if you just zoom in on the last 4 years, it's just like. Yeah. It's crazy how they've been moving one to one. They've very recent, like in the last few days, just like diverged, right? Software has been getting absolutely like decimated by all the Anthropic updates. Obviously, Bitcoin needs to become uncorrelated to this this software. This is a software ETF. It doesn't really make any sense that Bitcoin correlates with it one to one. But my point really is, look, for the SPX to actually start moving up, surely we're going to need a reversal in the Mag 7, right? An actual reversal, because last year we had Nvidia and Google basically pull the entire index up,
right.
and now you're actually starting to see some outperformance, right, from the 493, so the SPX 493 versus just those Mag 7. They're actually doing quite well in relative to last year. Everyone was very concerned. There's this concentration risk in the index, and actually it's dispersed somewhat, which tends to happen towards the end of cycles as well.
Right.
You do tend to see the sort of those dispersion of returns later on in cycles. Not to say this is the end of the cycle by any means, but for the SPX to continue up, we're going to need to see a lot of reversals in those Mag 7s, proper reversals. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, shit, man. I was looking at some of them today on my live stream, and well, shit, I'll just show you the charts, man.
Awesome.
Let me put back on these guys right here. Let's get rid of this, and let's go over to, I think, what were we looking at today? It was, that's right, yes, it was Meta. So Meta's obviously one of the biggest of the big.
Meta was the worst, actually.
Yeah, you think it's the worst?
No, it was hit. Sorry, it was hit the worst.
Oh, it was hit the worst. Yeah, sure. But I mean, I'm looking at this right here, and it's like, okay, looks like a higher low in the making to me.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if it had another step down to like 470, that's fine. Ultimately, these are all higher lows here. But, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at, what else did we look at today? It was, It was Amazon, I think. Yeah, I think it was Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon was hit.
This is not bearish. This is going to make new highs this quarter. I mean, look, it might not be this quarter, it might be next quarter, but I would feel confident that it's between now and what's the next month, May or something like that, whatever the fuck something it is, doesn't matter. Look, this is bullish. This is bullish. When I look at SPY, I don't. This thing is done going down. It's on the precipice of confirming a bullish engulfing today on hidden bullish divergence. And when we look at the quarterly time frame, so not going very, very high, it's just riding that red 5 EMA, and it just had a correction in April of last year down to the 21 EMA. So to me, this is a fresh uptrend. And look, you can look at this thing over time. When it starts to trend above that red 5 EMA, it loves to just base there and continue on and on and on. And again, this is a quarterly time frame. So these rallies, once they begin, I mean, shit, man, this one over here, this one before it fails, goes on for 1,644 days. I don't know how many years that is, but it's a lot. 3. We got this one over here, really reclaims, and until it loses it, another 14 bars on a 3-month time frame. So do the math on that. 4 or 5 years there. It reclaims actually quite soon after that, after retesting the 21 EMA. And what do you know? From there to the next high, another 10 bars. I mean, these things go on for a long time. This one just reclaimed over here, and we are, for reference, 4 bars in. I mean, to me, this is. I know it's counterintuitive. Again, the economic situation might completely be fucked. I don't know. It might be very, very terrible for people out there. In fact, it seems like it really is for a lot of people. But as far as markets go, when we're just purely talking about markets, not talking about economics, not talking about all of these other things, I have no reason to be bearish on this at all whatsoever at this moment. The only way I'd get bearish is if it came back down basically below last month's low. And at that point, yeah, I'd be extremely bearish. But for me, this thing is poised pending today's closure to retest the highs and make new highs probably this month.
Why? So the last month's low is like 6,300.
Something like that, yeah.
And so it would need to go like just wick below, close below that for you to turn bearish.
I mean, honestly, if it went below about 6,500, it'd probably get pretty bearish. But yeah, if you want to go like super technical, it'd be 6,356, something like that. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. I've not spoken to anybody who's been actually bullish, and honestly, it's like so refreshing to hear.
Look, again, I usually don't like being bullish. I love being bearish. I truly do. If you've watched my content for even a few years, you know that. But I don't think that this is the time. I don't think that this is the time. And hey, it might also be that we get another bifurcated market in which you get a new sort of Mag 7. I mean, shit, man, we are going through another sort of revolution in a way with AI and robotics and all these sort of things. So maybe those, start to take up the bolus of bringing up the SPY and just a general broad market, kind of creating these conditions that are conducive to everything else just being risen up by, a rising tide, basically. I'm completely open to that. At the end of the day, I'm just following the charts, following price. And I don't see a reason to be bearish, at least at this moment. I think if there is going to be a time, it's not going to be this quarter. It's probably not going to be next quarter. I think it'd have to be last quarter of this year, particularly to SPY and the rest of the broad market, I guess. But for now, just let the trend be your friend. The trend's going to the upside. Don't overthink it. And hey, man, it comes back to our last interview. Like, that's how I'm very much on this, because that's how I went broke, way back in the day. That's how I went broke. I fought the trend. It looked something like this. It is getting overheated. Yeah, it is going to stop at some point. Duh, everything does. But until it does, just ride it. Just let it be your friend, because it's probably still got, a decent amount of time from here.
I mean, to be honest, if it did end up being that kind of Q4 region, it would just be picture perfect. You'd have all of the IPOs basically happening around that time as well.
That's classic, ain't it, too?
Classic. Like, it happened in 1929, like before Black Friday. There was one there was an IPO that ran like 350x.
Jesus Christ.
Like, it happened in 99. Like the NASDAQ launch in 99, right? Like, Pico top, poof, happened in 07,
2020,
yeah,
2021.
exactly, right. You just had these, and this is the largest IPO we've ever seen, right? We've got SpaceX IPOing at 1.75 trillion, supposedly. OpenAI just raised $120 billion at like 850 bill, like before they're even listed. You're talking about a market that's having like 3 trillion coming into the market in this sort of period, and it just would be. I mean, if you look back on that in 10 years and be like, yeah, they just signed it off perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even consider that before. I'm glad that you brought it up, but yeah, you are 100% right. I mean, if there ever was a great top signal, it is, a significant amount of new IPOs coming into the market. And again, while we are here, just on the yearly time frame, I mean, is this a bearish chart to you? Like, I think most people look at this and say,
I don't think you can ever look at the SPX and say it's bearish over the long over a long time
period of time. Maybe not. No, I mean, if you do go to the chart that runs more than 200 years, yeah, there's definitely times to be bearish for sure. But I don't think this is it right here. I think that contrarian trade right now is to be bullish, to be long, and let people freak out over all of the headlines that are coming out. And when they start to get on board, it's probably when the top's going to be. I would assume at the earliest it's going to be end of this year. And I think maybe this market might go into Q1 of 2027. Something like that, man, would make a lot of sense to me.
If this happens, right, what happens to Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin doesn't really tend to trend counter to the SPX, right? So if the SPX puts in a high towards Q4 this year, or maybe even Q1 next year, then, and if Bitcoin's already putting in some kind of a low, maybe it's now, maybe it's all the way out to Q4, who knows? Like, it's going to take a decent chunk of time. But if Bitcoin has put in its low between now and, let's say before the SPX puts in its high, suddenly it like SPY rolls over, starts coming down. Can Bitcoin even survive that?
I mean, look, I have to go with what's always happened, and I would say no. I'd say definitely not. But right now, SPY is not bearish, so I'm not concerned about that. When I start to get topping signals there, which will probably come actually after Bitcoin truly tops, it's time to pack up the bags and go do something else for quite some time. But to answer your question, of course not.
Surely those times are not going to coincide, right? Because if SPY puts in its high end of this year, maybe Q1 next year, then there's no way Bitcoin's rallying to all-time highs in that sort of like 6-month
and
period.
Look, I mean, it might just be that Bitcoin gets a rally to, like, I don't know, 95,000 or 100,000 bucks, and that's what the move is, and then all markets come down, and we do actually break the 4-year cycle. It's possible for sure. I'm not so convinced that the 4-year cycle will always be a thing. In fact, I mean, to be fair, it has worked out pretty much perfectly. It pretty much has worked out perfectly, so can't deny that for sure. But I'm certainly not of the opinion that it always has to work out. So I'd be open to other things, but at the end of the day, man, I'm just going to follow. I'm just going to follow the charts on Bitcoin, and when I feel like it's topped out again, I'll be the one to call it. But until then, man, yes, SPY is a good. Yes, you do have to watch SPY. You do have to pay attention to SPY. Obviously, it's representative of the whole piece, and you're almost, I mean, I can't even think of a single scenario where Bitcoin on a higher term time frame was, continuing to new trending highs while SPY was coming down in a significant manner. Yeah, it happens on, maybe a daily, for example, but I'm talking about like, weekly, monthly trends, these sort of things. That has not been, that has never happened. So, technically I have to say no. I don't think so. But the optimistic part of me says maybe it's possible. Maybe this time is different. You never.
I mean,
know,
it would just be like it'd be beautiful, right, for the 4-year cycle to break, but to the upside.
Yeah, indeed.
So it's like the low's perfect, and then it's going up. Everyone's like, 4-year cycles back, baby,
man,
and then
we're
just
in.
gets
It's that long, and then it jumps in your face. Oh, that's definitely possible too, man. It's absolutely possible. But yeah, man, for me, personally, I do just kind of look at the markets in just sort of one. What's the word I'm looking for? Just like one facet. So if I'm looking at Bitcoin and I want to understand Bitcoin, I only look at Bitcoin. I'm not trying to look at SPY, because even though we have seen that relationship in the past, SPY's always topped after Bitcoin. SPY's always topped after Bitcoin. So it's like, look, I'm going to see the signals on Bitcoin beforehand. You're going to see that weekly trend reverse beforehand on Bitcoin before SPY even puts in a real downside move. So once that happens, I'll be happy to be bearish on Bitcoin again. But for now, it's not quite there.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, but I mean, the Bitcoin has almost been a leading indicator this whole time, right? So it'd just be peculiar to see SPY roll over, Bitcoin trend up. It would make me so confused.
That would be a real new world order or something like that, man. I don't know if it's a good thing, but something's happening.
Something's going wrong for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, amazing. I wonder if you could quickly. Are you seeing the same thing with QQQ?
Yeah, we could go over to that really quick. Let me just bring it up over here. Yeah, I should also disclose, I do hold Bitcoin. I do hold SPY. I do hold triple Qs. So, for the people who are like, he's just talking his book. Yeah, I mean, I hold these things and I'm bullish on them.
He's going to hold stocks.
Yeah. Look, on triple Qs, I see the same thing as I see on SPY. It's a little bit on the weaker side, to be fair, compared to SPY. But you got the same sort of setup here. You got a chance for a bullish engulfing that closes on the 2-week time frame today. I'd say the same thing here as I say on SPY. I think that you're coming back up towards these highs, assuming that today closes anywhere above 606, which is only 51 minutes away. I think you'll see that move probably this month, maybe latest next month. And then from there, you got to look at the quarterly, and it's the exact same thing as SPY. You've seen that correction down to the red 5 EMA. That's my trending move and average. And shit, man, I mean, this thing even has a better history long-term of trending above that. This can go on for quite some more time. I'm just not bearish on this. I wouldn't be surprised to see, 700 plus this year.
Amazing. We've got a bull back in the room.
I should always provide an invalidation as well. In this case, it's just going to be below about 580. If we see it back down below there, hey, I'm going to turn to a massive bear. But for right now, man, I see a lot more bullish signals than bearish signals. So I'm always going to go with what's more statistically likely. That's really how I roll.
That's how you got to do it. So Bitcoin boring, that's good.
Yeah.
And then equities just keep grinding up to the right.
Something like that, man. I mean, Jesus, that seems to me like to be the most painful thing for most people right now is just seeing markets go up while they're sitting on the sidelines and telling you about how the World War III started and we're all going to die and this and that. And maybe they're right, but market's still going to go fucking up. So I don't know.
It's true, man. Like I think the reality is most people should not be trading. Most people should step back from the market, not really listen to the news, and accept that actually traditional markets do tend to trend up to the right. And if you're out of them for long enough, that's a surefire way to basically, not beat inflation.
Well, look, most people will rightfully so listen to someone like Ray Dalio, who is brilliant and who I've learned a lot from and who I want to give a lot of credit to, in thinking that, oh shit, this is actually the end of an empire and everything's going to come crashing down. And so this time quite literally is different. But I've actually gone through and studied the same stuff as Ray Dalio. And what doesn't show up in his analysis is that how long these empires go on for can be, it can be massive, man. I mean, the Roman Empire, from the time that it started declining to the time that it was basically over, and this was like 250 to 300 years. Yeah. Like that's more than your fucking lifetime, It's way more than your lifetime. And even then, I mean, there have been several ones since then. You have the Dutch, you have the English, you have the French, you have the Spanish. All of these ones have enjoyed their time at the top, and they've all been longer than what the U.S. has enjoyed so far. So, when I see people leaning into those ideas, it's like, yeah, you're going to be right, but maybe not on this lifetime. And so, yeah, the U.S. is probably in decline, and yeah, things probably do change. But for now, it's still the best place to put your capital. It's still the best. It's still number one capital markets in the world. And shit, man, even if let's say China did surpass America, or we enter into a multipolar world. Well, multipolar world, already happened when the US was going against Russia back in the Cold War. What did markets do? They went up. They just went up. If China became like the world number one, are people going to really want to invest in China? I mean, you don't actually own what you own in China. At least in the U.S., we have the pretense of that. I don't know if it actually holds up when shit hits the fan, but at least we tell ourselves that. So you got that. So it still makes sense that people would invest here. It's just the place that has the best rules conducive to investing. So I don't know if that's changing anytime soon.
Unless you're Russia.
Unless you're Russian. Yeah, you can't invest here if you're Russian. No, man, I still run into Russian people here as well, actually, honestly. So
no, I just mean because they got their treasuries like snipped off, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
Back in 2000. I think there's an argument that's part of the reason that gold moves so hard, right? From sort of 2022 onwards. You had this as soon as they sanctioned Russian treasury holdings, there was definitely a step back from. It looks like I don't know how central banks operate, but it looks like at that moment there was definitely a turning of central banks just gradually selling off treasuries and accumulating more gold, because basically you do anything the US doesn't like, then you've just got billions of dollars.
Well, I feel like the very thin veneer of reality and all of the niceties that we had in the world order are started being torn off right now. I think people are starting to come to terms with, okay, the world is at war, and it's always at war. If you're number one, there's always the next person who's just trying to overtake you. That's always going to be the case. Right now, it's kind of like the West versus, you got Iran, China, and Russia together. And we're all vying to be king of the hill. It's always an ongoing war. And so these things, it's like, where do I go with it from here? It's just like, we used to pretend that wasn't an issue. We used to pretend that everyone's all hunky-dory, everyone's all, kumbaya and all this sort of stuff. But we're not. And people are starting to wake up to this fact. And yeah, Russia's going to be cut off, obviously, if they do not, play our game. That is the biggest superpower of the U.S. is the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is stronger than a nuke in some ways. Because once you get cut off from that, I mean, you're going to have real financial pain. And certainly Russia did experience that. Now, they've also found ways around it. And, and credit to them. I mean, shit, what are you going to do if you're Russia? Of course, you're going to do something like that. But still, at the end of the day, I feel like we're starting to all be red-pilled in that way. And I just feel like that's reality at this point, man. That's just reality. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know where I was going with that comment, but if you want to talk about gold, we can talk about gold.
No, but it's a good point. Actually, I think it's part of the reason, I mean, we might be going completely off track here, why Iran have actually been able to fight this fight for so long, because they've been sanctioned from the US in terms of being they've had these sanctions over them from the US for 45 years. And so they can't be sanctioned again because they've already hit that bullet. They've already got that wound. And basically now, and they've managed to close this strait, right? Because basically the sanctions are completely null and void on them because they've had them for so long. So you've had so basically the US were almost like the only weapon they actually have is actual weapons, whereas normally their sanctions are sufficient enough, like you say, they're almost like a nuke.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we're just not used to that because mostly in our lifetimes, I'm guessing you're kind of around the same age as me, we didn't have like this massive world war. Yeah, we had the Iraqi thing. Yeah, we had the Afghanistan thing, but these were never it didn't really ever feel like a real threat, This feels more like a real threat, I guess, in a way. Sure. It seems like the world's kind of coming to that precipice. But yeah, as far as gold goes, look, I'm of the opinion that gold is topped for this cycle. I'm of the opinion that gold is topped for quite some time. There's many reasons for this, but I think probably among the most compelling are a couple. One of them is a time analysis. Gold has had a very uniform way in which it's played out its last few cycles since the U.S. dollar became the world reserve currency. And from high to low, from cycle beginning to cycle high, it's played out about 10 years on average. Let me actually go through some of these right here. Okay, so where do we want to start this? Or do I already have my chart? No, I don't have my chart. Well, first things first, let's measure from the most recent cycle. So from this low right here to the high, how long was this? 127 bars, 3,864 days, a little over 10 years, basically. Okay, great. All right, if we go to the cycle previous to that, what did this one look like over here? This one from low to high, 43 bars or 1,247 days. Again, pretty uniform right there. Not exactly on the dot, but close enough as far as I'm concerned. This one over here, 59 bars, a little bit less, or maybe I'm measuring that from the wrong place. In fact, I am because it actually started right here. Boom, and what do you know? getting a little bit closer to 10 years and so on and so forth. Anyways, the reason I bring this up is because when did this cycle start for gold? It started in January of 2016. In January of 2016, it went from there to January of 2026, 121 bars on the monthly, and putting in all of the traditional topping signals. Here's the topping signals that you can, almost always are classic. One, massive volume spike that supersedes anything else that you see on the chart. Boom, you have that right there. Two, extreme volatility. That's represented by the BBWP indicator right here, the highest for the longest levels of volatility you've ever seen ever in this asset since '06, and previous to that, or actually, sorry, more like 1973, which again, that was on another major top as well. And then, of course, the monthly RSI. This thing is basically around the highs of all previous tops, too. This one's at a 96 read, which is just, so rarely do you see that on anything on a monthly time frame. And if we go to even higher time frames like that, like the quarterly here, once again, you got the second highest RSI read, which is going to naturally have some bearish divergence pending the next quarterly closure. You got a shooting star right here as well, which is a traditional sort of reversal indication. Now, it needs confirmation, which would mean coming back down below that $4,100 low. But you also got extreme on volatility right here, too. This one only comparable to when? To, again, the 70s. So to me, this is everything I need to see to just not be. I'm certainly not bullish on gold. Absolutely not. Do I think it could trade sideways and down, maybe put in the next macro low at mid threes or low threes? It's possible. Yeah, sure. But gold, I think, is done for a long time. And what does that tell you about the world or the world at war, I guess, if you are going to make any sort of correlation to this? The old saying goes, I think, in this particular case, which is show me the chart and I'll tell you the news. And, I think these sort of war fears are probably going to dissipate over time, or at least they're not going to matter that much to the point where people are, ditching the dollar for gold, for example.
Amazing analysis. So yeah, interesting. The gold chart basically priced in the war well beforehand, and now there is a war.
In a way, yeah. It was getting accumulated down here. All of these things, I'm sure, are decided so far in advance. Yeah. You and I, as just general plebs, we get probably less than 1% of the actual information that world leaders get when it comes to geopolitical events and all this sort of stuff. So it's like, I don't really like to argue over that sort of narrative because we don't fucking know anything. And it's like you're arguing, you're a blind person arguing with another blind person about what blue looks like. It's like no one wins. No one fucking knows.
But at every level, no one knows, right? Literally,
right.
Because even at very, very, very top levels, only certain people are told certain bits of information because, if they're told everything and they're caught, then they're like a massive security risk. So really, very few people know every single move on the chessboard.
100%. That's a great point to make out. But people act as if they've mapped out everything in the background because they listen to a podcast and yada yada. And at the end of the day, it's like most humans, almost all of us, are incentivized to just seek out information that agrees with us anyways. So we find something that we like, and then we just continue to go down that path. And before you know it, you're way far out on the on the edges there. But yeah,
before you know it, you think XRP is going to be $300.
Yeah, that's right. Before you know it, you're long in XRP and you're not selling until it's $1,000 plus, not a cent fucking less too. Yeah, man. I guess it really is like that. But yeah, in terms of gold, it's like, I think we've seen the top here, man. I can't be bullish on this asset at the moment. Even the 6-month time frame, is problematic here. So I think it's going to be a long period of sideways and down. I don't know, maybe you get a low, somewhere between 26 to low threes is what I'd guess, with bounces along the way. Something like that.
Gareth Soloway said about 3K. That was his level as well.
Sure.
Yeah. I chatted to him last week. That was cool.
Nice.
But yeah, he's very bearish gold as well.
Fair enough. Yeah. Maybe I should reconsider.
This has been awesome. Is there anything you wanted to run through at all that we haven't gone through so far?
No, I think we're good, man. I think we hit all the points, and yeah, man. I always enjoy talking with you and talking with the community here. So thanks for having me on. I'm always thrilled to see you, man. So yeah, all the best.
Oh, I mean, I really appreciate the kind words, mate. Honestly, it was like I think I told you last time, it was like a massive goal actually getting to speak to you in the first place. And so, like, to consider you to be like almost like a friend is great, man.
I think
so
we might be friends. I think we might be friends.
Amazing. Bro, just tell everyone where they can. I mean, I know they know you, but just anyway, just because you got.
Yeah, I'm Krown on YouTube, just KROWN, and on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 videos, all that good stuff. And we shall see what happens in the future, I suppose.
I can't believe you dropped the crypto cave off the back of your YouTube name.
That was many moons ago, man.
Yeah, I know.
I
It's
felt
upsetting.
like I had to do something different. So
You still got
we'll go
the
back at some point.
You know, the GIF in the top right corner still says Krown's Crypto Cave. So
I know, man.
Yeah,
I can't bring myself to
lose that.
replace
No,
it.
you can't.
I can't do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Please give the video a like if you could. Subscribe to the channel. It helps an awful lot. I know it's an annoying to ask, but it's a requirement. And have a great day. Thanks so much for watching.
Take care, guys. See you next time.